Okay, so after this, or during this gala, or maybe just a little bit before this gala, so where I spoke about this weighted automata and weighted logic stuff that Manfred and Paul started in 2004, 5, something like that. So they reworked together and tried to focus on weighted first order logic and trying to characterize the power of this particular sublogic, but leaving some open questions. And so afterwards, I worked with Dhruv Nevatia, a student from CMI, and I work on this topic. And so what I would like to present is a brief overview of this topic and also what new things we have obtained in this situation. Okay. Okay. So very briefly, what all of this is about. So it's about software verification, and sometimes you ask some questions about critical software that has to be verified somehow. And you have some kind of property that you would like to verify. And of course, you have some model checking task, whether or not the property holds for your particular system. Now, how you can model the property that you would like to verify? Well, you could write it like that in English somehow, and you may have some yes or no questions that you would like to answer somehow. But some people have tried to do now more quantitative verification, so not just yes/no answers, but computing some probability for something to happen, to count the number of solutions to a particular query, or to count a maximal delay or whatever. So going from Boolean to quantitative verification. Now the formal model that you have to write in some sense could be some traces, so like finite or infinite words. It could be nested words. It could be trees. And now the question that you ask is, for a particular formal way to model the specification, is it the case that the property holds for your particular trace or your particular system, your particular execution? And you have a lot of ways to write formally specifications that you all know, regular expressions or logic or temporal logics of some kind. Okay, now what happens in the quantitative setting? So in the qualitative world, you all know that it started with the result that some kind of automata models is equivalent to some kind of logics of second-order logics, monadic second-order logic. And now what happens in the quantitative world? So from the automata part, there are some kind of weighted automata. I will show you, I'm sure you all know that, but I will show you some examples in a minute. And from the logical part, it was less clear until Manfred and Paul started to work on that and to find some counterpart of the monadic second-order logic. Okay, so that was the goal at that time. So from the qualitative part, you focus on yes/no questions, definability or qualitative questions, and from the bottom part, you focus on more quantitative questions, so more computational questions. Okay, so here are two examples of weighted automata that Schützenberger introduced in the 60s. Okay, so it's classical automata, but on the label of the transitions, you not only have a letter from a finite alphabet, but you also have a weight. And now to compute the semantics, you need to give a little bit of semantics of what the weights really mean. So for instance, on the left part, you will consider a way to compute on weights, which is adding weights or multiply weights. And this is a summering algebraic structure. And if you do that, well, okay, you consider an input word. For instance, here you consider the input word ABA. And on that, you have several accepting runs because here you have a non-deterministic automaton. So one particular execution for ABA is to go from 0 to 1 when reading the first A and then loop reading the B and the A. And here on this particular example, all the transitions have weight 1, but this one has weight -1. And so if you really look carefully, you see that there are 3 accepting runs on the word ABA. And now what is this one here? Well, you use the second operation of the summing in order to compute, to accumulate the weights along the accepting runs. So here you multiply the weight 1 by 1 by 1, it's 1. Here you multiply 1 by -1 by 1, you compute -1, and so on. And now you have several accepting runs, and you resolve the non-determinism somehow by using the other operation in your summing, the plus. And so the semantics of the automaton, okay. The semantics of the automaton is to consider the sum of all the weights of accepting runs. So here you compute A1, and if you look closely the automaton, you can see that what it does is exactly counting the number of A's in the word, and you take minus the number of B's in the word. Okay, so that's one thing that you could do. Another thing that you can do on the other example is to change the summing in order to compute something else. And so here, for instance, you have the max plus summing. And okay, you do similar stuff for another input word ABA. You can check that, oh, there are 2 accepting words. You compute the sum now of the weights, the second operation, in order to compute the sum, so the weight of the run. And you accumulate by using the max operation. Okay, it gives you something. And again, if you look closely this automaton, you understand that it computes the maximal size of the block of A's separated by B's in your word. Okay, so if you have some questions, do not hesitate to interrupt me, of course. I will be happy to answer. Okay, so that's weighted automata, quite old stuff. And now comes the question how to specify some quantitative properties that you would like to be close enough to weighted automata. And so that's where Manfred and Paul started to work on an extension of monadic second order logic with weights that has been further generalized for structures that are more expressive than just words, so like trees, infinite words, nested words, and so on. But you could also imagine other extensions that have also been studied, like regular expressions with weights, or weighted temporal logics with weights again. So all of these is possible. But what I would like to focus is really the logical part, the first thing on top. And what I would like to present is what is this logic with formalism that we have been working on with Paul afterwards, and the equivalence with weighted automata. And then I will present some things to enhance the power of weighted automata in order to recognize more properties. And this will be with nesting or pebble capabilities. And at the end, the question will be, okay, inside the very big logic, there is the first order fragment. Is it possible to characterize this fragment inside the logic? Okay, so the decidability question will be still open, but at least we are able to characterize the automata that are able to recognize exactly that power. Okay. So the original weighted monadic second order logic looked like that. So it's really the classical monadic second order logic, I would say. The syntax is the same, apart from the fact that we have something here which is not just true or false, but could be any weight from the summing that you fix. Okay, but apart from that, with just the technical stuff, you push the negation as much as possible in the logic so that it does not bother you in the rest of the talk. So forget about negation. So you have arbitrary constants from a summing, so you can write some constants in the formulae. And the semantics, again, you use the power of the summing and the two operations, the plus and the multiplication operation of the summing in order to interpret the disjunction conjunction or the first order or second order existential quantification and universal quantification. So the atomic formulae, the true and the false of the classical logic, you use the two elements 0 and 1 of your summing, which are specific elements that you use as a way to represent true and false. And then apart from that, well, if you have a disjunction at some point, if you have a phi 1 or phi 2, the semantics on that, on a particular word, will be the sum of the semantics of phi 1 over the word plus the semantics of phi 2 over the word. So it's really a generalization of a particular summing, which is the Boolean summing, where indeed the disjunction would be a disjunction and the conjunction would be a conjunction. So you just generalize that in order to compute some weights. So it's better to see some examples. So here, for instance, imagine that you have this formula, which in the Boolean word would say there exists a position in the word that is labeled by A. Okay, so this regular language. Now, if you compute it on the natural summing that we have seen before with the plus and the time operation, this existential quantification, you will, the semantics of it will be in terms of the first operation of your summing, so the sum operation of your summing. So not only you will check whether there is a position labeled by A, but now you will count them. You will count one for every position that is that fulfills this formula, so that has indeed an A on the particular position of the word. So you just compute the number of A's in the word. Okay. So you could do more stuffs, of course. And so, for instance, here you could say for all position X, there exists a position Y on the left that is labeled by A. Okay, so in terms of the Boolean setting, you would say something on the first letter of the word. But in the quantitative world, not at all. You do some computations. So the universal quantification really means that you will multiply some stuffs for every position in the word. The existential one will be some kind of sum. Okay, and if you work a little bit, you see that for this particular word, you compute that. And for a word that has only A, for instance, inside, you will compute n factorial. Okay, now there is a problem, because this is way too big for the weighted automata. In terms of weighted automata on this particular summing, you will never be able to do more stuff than something which is a constant to a linear function of the length of the word. You will not be able to compute more stuff than that, combinatorially speaking. So here, n factorial, it's too big. So you are sure that weighted automata cannot recognize this particular function. Okay, so this is not the good logic, right? So you need to restrict it somehow in order to recover the semantics of weighted automata. And so indeed, what Manfred and Paul have done is to find a good way to restrict this logic. Okay, so first of all, the universal second order quantification is much too powerful, so just forget about it. The first order universal quantification is also too powerful. It's exactly what we have seen in the particular counter example. This is exactly the way you jump over the power of weighted automata. So you should somehow restrict it, not completely forbid it, but restrict it. And the conjunction operation also has some problems, in particular if you are in a non-commutative summing. So once again, you should restrict this operation. Okay, so that was the original thing, finding some good restrictions in order to recover weighted automata. But instead of explaining you exactly what are the restrictions, I will jump to a similar setting. It's just somehow a rewriting of this particular result that we have done with Paul in 2015. So just to have a way to decouple somehow the Boolean fragments and the restrictions in order to just have a grammar that gives you exactly what you have the right to do in the logic. So first of all, you put the Boolean fragment away. So now, okay, when I write for all, it really means a for all in terms of Boolean semantics. So you just compute the classical Boolean semantics of monadic second order logic. On top of that, you include some formulae that are very, very specific, a very specific shape that we have called step formulae. So what you can do in that, okay, so now the weights appear, so you can write constants in this kind of step formulae, and you can also test Boolean properties. So you can say if the property phi, which is a Boolean formula, holds, then you compute something, which will be a step formula. Otherwise, you compute something else. So it's really if-then-else construct that you write, and you can compute quantitative stuff different in the two cases. So for instance, here, if the variable x in the word, the position is labeled by A, you compute 1. Otherwise, you compute 0. It's exactly the semantics that we gave previously. But you can do some more stuff. If it's labeled by A, you compute 1. Otherwise, if it's labeled by B, you compute -1. Otherwise, you compute 0, which is something that we have done in the quantitative automata with the two transitions labeled by A and B on the previous example. And of course, you could do some more nested if-then-else constructs. And so these are the step formulae. And the good stuff is that the semantics of a step formulae, there is no computation somehow. You just take some constants that appear in the formulae at some point S1, S2, Sn, somewhere in the formulae, and this will be your semantics. There will be no sum, no product, no computation. Just you take one constant that appears in the formula. So for now, I don't need to give you any semantics for the sum or the product. Okay, so a step formula, because of that property, takes finitely many values, and the preimage of this particular value, it's an MSO definable property, so it's a regular language. Okay, so now you have no computation at all, and now you put back the computation, and you do it very wisely. So first of all, there is no times operation, so I just remove it. You still keep the if-then-else construct. You add a new 0 element that I will speak, so that I will present in a minute. We don't write disjunction in order to say, okay, we want to do the sum. We really write the sum somehow. So now you have the operation inside the formula. And we write the first order and second order quantification in terms of sum and products over first order or second order variables. But the Greek letters matter. So here it's really phi. So you can have as many first order existential or second order existential quantifications as you want. But for the product operation, you just put it over one step formula. So this is exactly the restriction of Manfred and Paul. Okay, so here I've said it. This also. So intuitively speaking, this operator of product over all positions x of psi, what it does is you scan the word, and for every position of the word, you interpret the formula psi by marking somehow this position. And so for every position of the word, you compute a weight somehow. And of course, semantically speaking, in your mind, you should keep in mind that you will multiply the weights that you will compute, the n possible weights that you will compute along the word. But okay, for a minute, let's forget about this semantics. And let's say that we just keep all of these weights, one besides the other ones. Okay, so now what it means is that we have an abstract semantics somehow, which computes for every possible word a sequence of weights, the sequence of weights that you obtain by interpreting the variable, the free variable x on each position of the word, and by computing some particular weights because it's a step formula, so it's just a constant that appears in the formula. And now you just gather all of that in a sequence of weights. You do not actually apply the multiplication. You just keep the sequence of weights. So this is a multi-set of sequences because you could imagine that there are several ways. Yes. Okay, so this is just for the product over x of psi. So there is no nesting. Huh? Once I've done one product over x, I cannot do one more because it's not in a good type anymore. It's not a core, a step formula anymore. Yeah, it could appear in various places. So here, for instance, in this psi formula, of course, the formula, the variable x will appear, and maybe some other variables that will appear both in this phi formula. At some points, you could check some Boolean properties over that. Sometimes it will hold, sometimes it will not hold. Okay, so I gave you the semantics of this particular operator, which is now a multi-set, because there could be repetition. Somehow the same sequence of weights could appear several times over a particular word. So it's a multi-set of sequences of weights. We did not apply the product. And now that you have that, indeed, you can use this same multi-sets of sequences of weights, and you can just say that this sum operations is just the unions of the multisets that you have computed so far. So you don't apply the product, and you don't also apply the sum. You just gather all the sequences that you could compute in your formula. And this particular zero constant that we add is just the neutral element of this particular multiset, so the empty multiset. You just add the capability at some point to say, I don't want to compute anything. Okay, so that's the core weighted MSO logic. And so the semantics now is not at all quantitative anymore. You just compute multisets of sequences of weights. It has no meaning somehow. But the good thing is that you have exactly all that you need in order to compute all the quantitative semantics that you would like afterwards. Now, if you give me a summing, I can indeed compute the product of all the elements in the sequences and make a big sum of all the sequences in the multiset. So you could apply the same trick, but by changing the summing, you will compute different weights. Okay. Now let's come back to the weighted automata, because you can do exactly the same trick for weighted automata. Instead of computing the product of all the weights that you encounter during the transitions, you could just keep the weights of the transitions, put that into a sequence of weights, and for the possible accepting runs along a particular word, you could just gather that into a multi-set of sequences of weights. So exactly the same trick happens for automata. So a word now will be associated with a multi-set of sequences of weights, the sequences that you see along the transitions.
This is just doing things in the free summary.
Exactly. It's just doing things in the free summary, which somehow we call that like that, but okay. And so now if you really want to do something which is quantitative, to compute some quantitative semantics to that, you just have to give me some way to aggregate this multi-set of sequences of weights into a particular weight that belongs to some algebraic structure. So of course, for a summing, as we have seen before, it will just be the fact that you sum over all possible sequences that appear in your multiset, and you multiply all the weights inside the sequence. Okay, so that's the classical semantics of weighted automata, but you could do something else now. You can do any aggregation that you want, you just have to describe it. So for instance, you could say, okay, I don't really want a multiplication operator, which is a summing here. Something else. I would like to be able to compute something with a sequence of weights. So for instance, it could be averaging the values along the run or taking a discounted value or anything. It will work because now you just have kept everything under control in order to be able to compute that. So this, that's something that Manfred worked in 2014. Okay. So what do I want to say? Okay, so just to come back to the examples, what it means is that instead of computing the weight 1 plus minus 1 plus 1 for this particular example, you just keep the multiset of sequences of weights. So you have all the you have more information, you have all the information available then to do all the computations that you want. Okay. And the good stuff is that under this abstract semantics, the multiset semantics, you can once again prove the theorem that the core weighted MSO logic is equivalent to weighted automata. So even if you don't have the actual meaning of the product and the sum operations that you will have to perform at some point, you could still do an equivalence proof in between. And so, of course, then whatever aggregation you consider, you will have the same semantics. Okay. So the proofs are really constructive, so we can go from one end to the other quite easily. You preserve the set of constants that appear in the automata or in the logic, so you do not perform any computation in the transformation. And this is the actual logic. There is no further restrictions on the logic and no hypothesis on the structure of weights. Okay. Okay. Now, I said there is no yes.
Can you, if you take a semiring, apply the same aggregation on both sides, on weighted automata and on core MSO, the semiring aggregation, then won't you run into the same problem of n factorial being too big?
No, because you cannot write the factorial, because I cannot write the same formula as before, which was a for all, so a product over x, and inside there was a sum over y. So here I cannot write it in core weighted MSO. So exactly, we have restricted the shape of the formulae in order to not jump into this problem, to avoid it. Okay. Okay, so I said there is no restriction, but okay, of course there is a restriction. I mean, there is a psi here and not a phi. So what if I remove somehow this restriction? I would like to be able to express more properties, and maybe if I really want to compute this n factorial, how can I do it with automata or with logics? Okay. So I will change my example. I will consider another one, which is you take a word over the alphabet A, B, and now you would like to compute, why? I don't know, but let's say you would like to compute the number of A's power the number of B's. Okay. If you think a little bit about that, this is too much. For a weighted automaton, it's not possible. It's more, I mean, if you are in the natural summing, it's more than just a linear exponent in the size of the formula. Okay, so, but still I would like to write somehow a formula in order to express that. So first of all, okay, at some point I would like to compute, and the computation will be done in this natural summing. The letters are A and B's, and what I will allow in my formula is to only use constant 1 from my summing. I will not use any more constant than 1. So this is what I write here. It's the set of constants of my formula. So here is the formula. So what it says is, okay, make a product for all position x. If it is labeled by some letter that is not B, you jump to the else and you compute 1, which is a new constant. So it's a bold one, similar to the bold 0. So it's a bold one which says, do not compute any weight. Do not put anything more in your logic. Okay, but if it is labeled by a B, now what you would like to do is compute that, compute the length, the number of A's in your word, so that at the end you will indeed have computed the size of the number of A's times power the number of B's. Okay, but to compute the number of A's, this is just a sum operation over 1 if you have compute, if your position is labeled by A, and 0 meaning nothing, empty multiset over Y's. Okay, so this, just to trick you somehow, I used the same letter X twice, but I could use different variables, of course, if you want, but you can reuse the variables. So just as an example, in the multiset semantics, it really means that if you start with this particular word, for every letter, either you are an A, and what you compute in this particular product is this one operator, and the one operator is the other neutral element of the free summering. So it's the multiset with only the empty sequence inside, this one. And if you are labeled by a B, you compute that, and that in the multiset semantics means you check every position X in the word, you compute 1 if it is labeled by A, and you compute nothing, the empty multiset over Y's. So at the end, it will gather into a multiset where you have 3 occurrences of the weight 1. Okay? So you do that for every letter, and then you have multisets of sequences that multiply by concatenation of the sequences. Okay, so I did not write it down, but you have some multisets computation to perform. But if you apply then the aggregation operator, which is the natural one on the summering operation, you indeed compute something which is 9 times the sequence 1, 1. 1, 1 will be computed, the semantics will be 1, and you add 9 times 1, so you compute 9, which is exactly what you want for this particular, unless I've mistaken, if on this particular example, 3 square. Okay? Okay? So that's the first example. Let me give you another example in order to show you some other capabilities. Ah, okay, maybe before I'll give you a little bit of syntax. So the weighted first order logic, so it's exactly as for core weighted MSO. We have somehow separated and kept separated the first order fragment of the Boolean MSO logic. And apart from that, you have a weighted fragment somehow where you can do some computations at some point. But I've removed the second order sum operation because I want to focus on the first order fragment. So I've removed this capital sum over capital X variables. But now this is the Greek letter phi, which means I don't have step formulae anymore. I can stack as many product operations as I want in my formula. And moreover, just by symmetry, I've reinserted the product operation, the binary product operation, because it will not cost me anything else. Okay, so this is, there is a little number 1 here because it will not be completely satisfactory, this logic. So I will show you another example to explain to you why I need to add something else. Okay. And so for this other example, we'll jump into the non-commutative world. So now the summering over which I would like to compute at the end will not be commutative. So indeed, we are doing some kind of transducers in this particular slide. So you take a word U, you consider all the non-empty consecutive factors of your word, W. You take the mirror of W, so what I call W tilde, and you duplicate. So you compute this for a particular word. What you would like to compute is the concatenation of twice the mirror of the factors of your word. So for this particular word ABB, you take the factor A, you compute AA. You take the factor B, you compute BB. It appears twice, but you don't count the fact that it appears twice. For the factor AB, you mirror BA, you multiply BA, and so on and so forth. Okay? And you don't consider the empty word. Well, it's not much more complicated to write it in the logic, except that, okay, we have a little trouble here because I would like to consider a particular factor of my word that could be marked with two variables x and y, x for the beginning, y for the end. And what I would like is now to compute the mirror of this particular factor. But the problem is that with this logic, you have no way to do that because this particular product, by default, somehow, will compute all the positions of your word from the left to the right. Okay, that just you have to do a choice somehow in the semantics. So just for that particular reason, we have a problem of non-commutativity. And of course, okay, let's use a trick. I include one more operator, which makes the product in the other direction, from the right to the left. Okay, so this gives you such formula, which exactly computes for two positions x and y. It computes the mirror of the factor. Okay, trust me. Maybe you shouldn't, but okay. Normally it's correct. And if you do that, well, doing that is exactly taking all the positions x and y, x being before y. And then for such two positions, any such two positions, you will just compute twice the same mirror factor. And by the way, if x is not less than y, you compute the empty multiset, so you kill this particular case. Okay, and so here, if you start with the word AA, you will compute that. And somehow the aggregator operator will now remove the multiset and just keep one version of all the sequences. Okay? So now that we have added this operator, here is the full weighted first order logic that we have considered. So with a right to left product, just in case the computation that we will perform at the end is non-commutative. Of course, if the product is commutative, you don't really need that. Okay, so that's the logic. And so, okay. So now what about the automata? Because since the logic is much more powerful than core weighted MSO, I mean, slightly orthogonal because you don't have the second order quantification. So it's completely orthogonal, but it's still much more powerful because you can do as many products as you want. I need to add some capabilities also in the weighted automata. And the way I will try to present you that, so there has been, so we have done something which is, we have made some bad choices at some point, I think. So we have called that pebble weighted automata with some very representative ways to drop some pebble, lift the pebbles and stuff like that, which is very nice. But I will use another presentation here without the pebbles that we call nested weighted automata, which may be a little bit neater to work with. So here is a nested weighted automaton to compute exactly the example before. The W tilde for all factors of U. Okay, so what is this monster? Okay, so the thing in this drawing is that now, first there are arrows. So my automaton is a two-way automaton. Because I could be in some non-commutative summering, I would like to be able to do the computations in the automaton in one direction or the other. So I will have a two-way mechanism in my automaton. So on the transitions, I can write right arrows or left arrows, whether I want to go to the right or to the left. Okay, that's it. But apart from that, on some transitions, there are weights. So here, remember that the weights because it's somehow a transducer, the weights or languages. So here is a weight. It computes a letter, a language, which is a singleton letter. But if you imagine the natural sum-hearing, we could have 2 or 3 or 4 on the transitions. Okay, so some transitions are as in weighted automata, but some others, like this one, you have another automaton on top of this transition. So what it does is, so let's make an example. Let's consider this particular fragment and the word which is here. So because of the two-way navigations, we have to surround the word by some markers, just to be sure that the automaton will not fall out of the word. Okay, that's just some bad stuff. And again, because we have two-way navigations, I will consider a semantics which could be a little bit strange, which says that the computation could start anywhere it wants in the word and stop anywhere it wants in the word. So it's not forced to go from the left to the right. So which means that this particular automaton, which has just one single transition, what it does is pick a position somewhere in the word, do this particular transition, which reads any letter, okay, and call another automaton that we call AX that will run on the very same word, but with this particular position marked with the variable X. Okay, so now you have learned something, you have marked a particular position. Okay, so now I should show you what this automaton AX is. Okay, so this one, okay, once again, quite monstrous, but let's focus on this single line. So what it does is to start anywhere, but the first letter it will read is something, oh, it does not type anymore. There is two components now in my automaton, in my letter, because there is the A part, but there is also the position of the variable X. So somehow now the automaton reads words over the alphabet 8 times 0, 1. You can remember you have a 0 if you are not labeled by X, you have a 1 if you are labeled by X. So what this transition means is you start on the position X, you compute the weight bold 1, which means nothing in the multiset, just the empty sequence. You go to the right, and non-deterministically at some point you stop, and once again you will call a sub-automaton. Okay, and you will mark it with another position, which I call Y, just for us to be able to read something on the picture. Okay, and now, once again, you call a sub-automaton, A, but now the alphabet somehow remembers not only the word, but also the position of X and of Y. And here is the last part. And what it does now, okay, you have the two positions X and Y marked very well. Now you just have to compute twice the mirror of the factor. And this is exactly what this very classical two-way weighted automaton does. It starts on the position where there is the Y. So this means there is the Y. You start on the position Y. And you just copy the letter that you read until you reach the position where there is an X. Okay, so here you start from here, you read A, you compute A, you read B, you compute B, and so on until this position. Now that you're on the position X, you loop back to the right in order to reach again the position labeled by Y, and you do it again. So what it does is exactly compute for this particular factor, ABBA, so the mirror of the factor, concatenated with ABBA. Okay. And that's it. Now you have the full weighted automaton, nested two-way weighted automaton that does exactly what we want. Okay, so what about this logic, weighted first order logic, and those nested two-way weighted automata? Well, what we have is exactly that. This is powerful enough in order to represent all that weighted first order logic can do. So you can have a translation, it's constructive, In linear time, moreover, which could be a little bit surprising, we go from first order logic into automata in linear time with a linear time construction, but it's because we have nested capabilities, so we can use that and we don't need to do any kind of complementation or whatever bad stuff that you could need. And because of that, you have a linear time construction from any particular weighted first order formula into the nested two-way weighted automata. Okay, that was good. That was one of the first results of my thesis with Benedict, Paul, and Mark. Mark, I don't know where you are, somewhere there. So, okay, maybe I will skip that. Just to say that, of course, weighted first order logic is not powerful enough in order to recognize all that nested two-way weighted automata can do, just because it's already not enough without the quantities, just in the Boolean world. So you need something more, which is some kind of transitive closure operator. So we have exactly characterized some kind of logic which is powerful enough in order to come back from nested automata to the logic. But that's not exactly what I want to speak about. What I would like to speak about in the remaining time is what about deciding weighted first order logic? So now imagine that I give you a particular nested weighted automaton. Is it possible to say whether or not this particular automaton can be described in weighted first order logic? It's not always possible. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Can you tell me if it is okay or not? Okay, so I can already tell you, as I told you in the introduction, the problem is still open, so I don't have any solution to give you today, but we have made some progress. Of course, you all know that if you are in the Boolean world, you exactly know good characterizations and which gives you some algorithms in order to decide that. So, so for a language, you say that L is first order definable if and only if blah, 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 blah. At some point, it's accepted by some automaton which is aperiodic, which is some kind of property on loops in your automata, anyway. And moreover, there is also an algebraic property on the syntactic monoid of your language that you will be able then to test in p-space. So it's completely known, and that's perfect. The world is perfect in this setting. Now, if you go into the quantitative world, okay, there are still things that we miss, but at least I will show you what Manfred and Paul and Dhruv and myself have been able to obtain in order to relate the first sentence with the last one. So how to relate automata with aperiodic behaviors with the logic. Okay, so what Manfred and Paul have done is to consider what you obtain if you start not from a nested two-way weighted automaton, but a weighted automaton. So you remove the two-way navigation and you remove the nesting. And then you ask whether or not there is a weighted first order logic that you could write, a formula of weighted first order logic that you could write in order to recognize the power of this particular automaton. Okay, so of course, because they start from a much less powerful automaton, they reach also a logic which is much less powerful, so what they call core weighted first order. So once again, the same restrictions apply as for core weighted MSO. So something like that. The details do not really matter for this end of talk. And the result that I have been able to obtain is that this particular logic is exactly equivalent to some kind of weighted automata where first you have aperiodic behaviors, okay, exactly as before in the Boolean setting. But moreover, you need some more property. You need to control the ambiguity of the automaton. So if you have an exponential number of accepting runs on your particular word, then you will run into troubles. So you need polynomial ambiguity in order to recover exactly the good power. Okay, so that's what they have been obtained, and also some particular cases where you remove some of the operators of the logic. But this does not give you a decision procedure because the algebraic part, which gives the p-space algorithm, does not exist so far into this setting. Okay, and so what we have done with Dhruv is exactly generalizing that. So it might not sound very surprising on the board because it's exactly what you would expect from the result by Manfred and Paul. So the full weighted first order logics is exactly what you could obtain with a nested two-way weighted automaton, which is aperiodic, exactly the naive generalization of what could be aperiodicity, and again with the polynomial ambiguity. Okay, so we have several other characterizations, because here, because of the nesting capabilities, you don't really need the full polynomial ambiguity. You could restrict to linear ambiguity and you still recover the same fragment. And once again, from the two-way capabilities, there are some restrictions in two-way automata that we call sweeping automata. So a sweep is just that you just have the right to change the direction on the border of the word. You don't need to turn inside the word, you just turn on the border of the word. And if you consider this particular case, you still have the same power, which may sound a little bit surprising because it's not true if you don't have nesting. So it's because we use nesting automata that you can simulate somehow every two-way computation with a sweeping one. And this is the non-trivial thing in this particular result, because we need this in order to come back to the logic. Okay, I will skip that. And -1 minute, okay? Okay, so just to tell you a little bit about the... Okay, I will skip that. So the work, the most of the work in the proof is really to come back from nested two-way weighted automata to sweeping automata, which is not true in general, but it's true because of the nesting. And so it's exactly here that we have some technical stuff to do in order to transform the runs and reshape it as we want. Okay, so let me skip this one with the nice drawings. Okay. And just to briefly summarize, so what I've shown you is some logics from weighted MSO, weighted first order with transitive closure, weighted first order, core weighted MSO, and core weighted FO, some logics that compute some stuffs about finite words, and equivalent automata models that represent exactly, that have exactly the same power with some aperiodicity or polynomially ambiguous conditions. And there are a lot of open questions, like, okay, this gives you a characterization for some parts, like polynomially ambiguity, but Manfred and Paul were able to obtain some characterizations also for fragments like finite ambiguity or unambiguity in the automata. We were not able to obtain it so far from the nested case. Okay. So all those logics have been generalized to other structures than just finite words. And of course, the very same questions could also be asked for some other structures like trees, infinite words, and so on. And the final one is, of course, okay, we miss some algebra here in order to decide the questions that are hidden below. And I will stop there, and if you have some questions, please. Faut crier très fort.
So, what about questions like membership in a given? So, I mean, I give you an automaton, let's say weighted automaton, and I ask you, does it accept a word over whose value is above something, or, you know?
So, okay, so when you ask some questions like that about decidability in weighted automata, so here you have seen that in this talk, I've shown you that because of the abstract semantics, the multi-set semantics, you don't really care about what you are computing. Anyway, it's characterizations between logic and automata that will compute very closely the same semantics. So there is no transformation with the weights. As soon as you ask me some questions like that about threshold properties, or you want to compute some stuff in a particular summering, it really depends on the summering. So for some kind of summerings, the property will be decidable, and we have some nice algorithms for that. And for some other summerings, it's highly undecidable. So it really matters for these particular algorithmic questions, what is the summering? So there are some problems like the emptiness of the support of the automata, where the question is completely solved. You know exactly for which summerings it will be decidable and for which it won't be. For some other questions like the threshold, there are still, there are some nice summerings where you know the answer, but there is not the full characterization of the summerings where it is. So it depends. So the situation is less clear.
Have you considered ways of restricting the nestedness of the two-way automata?
So what do you mean? Which kind of restrictions?
Well, for example, instead of marking a position with X anywhere in the world, you could only mark it at an end of the word. I mean, the non-marked position should remain a connected set. So you.
Okay, so yes. So for instance, so here we mix. So I will have maybe a non-satisfactory answer, but so here I've mixed, for instance, two-way with nested. Okay, so my automaton is allowed to go in both directions and mark some positions with some nested capabilities. Of course, you could say, okay, but what if I really want to stick to one-way behaviors? So I don't want to go two ways. And so in this particular case, the nested somehow is also a little bit restricted, because once you have marked a position with the X, maybe the next one that you will mark with an X will be on the right. So you have some way to have some restrictions on the nesting. So there are other models. Okay, so now we'll switch from Pebble, to the Pebble world, because for this, maybe it's easier to understand. So it's exactly, and you have seen, I've put some red and green pebbles on the world just because I come from this particular setting. But you could imagine that the pebble, once you have dropped the pebble, you can only see the last one or the two last ones that you have dropped. You could have dropped maybe 10,000 pebbles, but you can only see the last one. You could also imagine that you have pebbles with some names, and you can redrop the pebble X. So it's not the same, but it has the same name. So the same way in the logic, you can reuse variable names. You can imagine nested capabilities where you can reuse the same name and forget about the other positions. So there are various ways to, with a nice result about what are the kind of properties that you can verify or compute with this operation. So there have been some work about that, especially also with Paul.
Thanks.
Merci. So I'm wondering about the relation between what you told us, especially with this free semmering semantics, and what other people are calling quantitative automata, right? If you look at these recent work of Udi Boka, for example, all those things with history determinism for quantitative automata, are there any intersections between what you are doing and what those people are doing?
I don't know if there is I don't know any results that is in the intersection. There is an intersection between the people because we speak with them. I mean, I speak with Carolina a lot because of course she's in Marseille too. So we speak. So yes, there are some relationships. It's not completely clear exactly what, but they really use also this kind of very strong sense about how you compute and how you gather the weights along the sequence and stuff like that. So at least we can understand each other. I don't know if it gives any result, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Long live India and France friendship.